Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Product Coalition podcast. It's great to have you listening again. I've got a great new episode for you. First up, I want to give a shout out to Proud Mary Coffee, who are hosting us from a recording location. Proud Mary is a specialty coffee roaster, cafe, coffee educator and retailer based in Melbourne, Australia and Portland over in the USA. I'm personally fortunate to be part of Proud Mary's story, so big thanks to all of the Proud Mary coffee team here in Melbourne and over in Portland, Oregon. To find out more about Proud Mary, visit proudmarycoffee.com.au if you're here in Oz, or it's proudmarycoffee.com in the USA. Or my recommendation is get down to the cafe. My favourite one on the menu has got to be the potato hash, and the cafe is a great way of experiencing the Proud Mary story and getting a taste for some of the coffees. So let's get going. Thank you, Iain Summers, for joining us today.
Thank you, Jay.
It's great to have you here. We're going to be talking about product managing a service, which is a whole new thing for the podcast. We've not done anything like that before. But do you mind sharing a bit about yourself, mate?
Sure. So as you probably know from my accent, I'm Scottish. Been in Melbourne and Australia for about 15 years. Had a bit of a journey across the world doing various roles. I've managed global teams, local teams, regional teams, managing products, managing services, as well as different industries. So I've been in the travel industry. I've also been through into the IT industry, and now I'm doing an awful lot of stuff in the IT and healthcare. So
awesome.
Quite a diverse amount of things to do.
Fantastic. It's going to make for a good chat. But first, let's get stuck into your Melbourne knowledge. Since this is a Melbourne theme for these, we've got 7 podcasts, all with Melbourne people. So number 1, what is your favourite tea or coffee joint in Melbourne?
I'd have to be Proud Mary after the thing I'm drinking right now. It's fantastic.
You don't have to say that.
No, the Kenyan one this morning, very, very good.
Yeah?
Yep.
Good man. Favourite spot for a bit of lunch in the CBD? CBD, for those that aren't Australian, is Central Business District or downtown Melbourne.
Yeah, I would have to say there's a place called Grain on Flinders Lane.
Right.
Quite near my place.
Yep.
Fantastic food, great service, always busy, but really, really good quality.
Nice. Okay. Good to know. Not been there. Favourite tram route in Melbourne?
109.
Oh, where's that?
It takes you to the beach.
Oh, right, okay. St
Being
Kilda?
a Scotsman, it takes me away from the beach, so that's probably a better one.
Favourite Melbourne sort of product meet-up or conference?
Probably the main conference I've been to is the Cisco Live, which is
Right.
a huge sort of global event.
Right.
The technology they use goes across all industries, so it's a vast array of people that turn up. But all the meetings, as usual, you get the conferences and you hear certain things, but it's actually all the people you meet around the conference that makes it interesting. So being in Melbourne, it's great to showcase our city, and I quite enjoy the fact that there's lots of people I know from around the world that will come down, and you always catch up with them, and then you can show them around. So it's a good way of showcasing the city, but catching up with people, and they're paid to be here, so it's everybody's
Cool.
happy.
You got a favourite suburb in Melbourne?
Port Melbourne.
Port Melbourne. Very nice. Very nice. Okay, thank you. Let's get stuck into it. So we're going to chat in, the topic we wanted to chat about today was product managing a service, and obviously you've got a huge amount of experience there in serviced industries.
Yep.
But what does product managing a service mean for you?
To me, it's an interesting one, because everyone who talks about product management is thinking about it's a product that you're giving a customer. And that's all well and good, and that's exactly what we should be thinking it is. But the thing that makes a product work is the service that goes alongside it. How do you support it? How do you look after it? How do you make it evolve? How do you do continuous improvement? So I find that being an operations guy, and I've been a travel agent all the way up through to being a director in an IT team, is adding what you view as the customer's viewpoint into what you then service them on that product, which is actually the thing that makes a difference. So the feedback loop, so you get the intelligence coming back from the service teams on how the product's performing, so that you then drive the performance. And I'll talk a little bit later on maybe about how I've done that in the past. But I think that to me is it's a product in itself, but more than anything, it's actually what you bring to the table on top of your product. So a lot of businesses now, and our own business at where I work now in Architect, is we're doing a managed service that we're charging for this value-added service, and that's in addition to the products that we use. So the way I've always looked at it is a product or a piece of hardware is nothing until you put a human being on top of it. And that's the way I look at it.
Right, okay. Could you talk a little bit about well, let's go back to the start. What was your first entry into giving this type of service and support? I know you got this, big travel background there.
Yeah.
Was that the entry for you?
That's where I started, yes. I started in Thomas Cook, and God rest their soul, they've had a tough time recently, but it was a great place to do my training and my apprenticeship. And what I learned there, the training they gave us was industry best. And what we did, we were selling the same holidays that the other companies were selling. They were on the same flights, they were on the same transfer buses at the same hotels. The difference was it was what I made them excited about on the holiday. How did I service them in that space? And the true measure of that is then how that is then, I guess, viewed on by your customers and whatever. So when you get a point, if you've done the right level of service and you've given them what they need, and they go home to the pub at night and tell their friends what they did, they went, I saw Big Iain at the Thomas Cook the other day, and he helped me out with a holiday, you should go and see him. And people come in and go, I'm Mr. and Mrs. Simpson's friend. I hear you're Iain. Can you help us out with the holiday? That, to me, is adding a massive amount of value as a service on top of the product that we were selling. So I guess that's where I got a love of it. I liked, as you can tell, talking to people. But it was about selling a dream and selling people a holiday. You were enthusiastic about it. You got more sales. Product looked better. Company was profitable, and everybody wins. So
I think that's a really unique entry into how you've got to where you are now. You're not coming from a hard technology engineering background. You're coming from being in front of real people, driving advocacy and referrals, and just trying to be establish really good human-to-human relationships.
And that's actually what it's about. I think, the technology is going to sit there and do nothing until you tell it to do something. So getting people in the right headspace and to add that value is for me a key thing, and that's where I've built my career. It's about building strong teams and valuable teams who are meeting the business objectives but constantly evolving and doing things differently to add value to the product. Brilliant.
Now you mentioned earlier you've travelled the world, lived in different places around the world, in different service sort of management centres globally, regional support and also local, and across different industries. What are some of the sort of ground rules, similarities that you see when it comes to product management and service-based offerings? Yeah, so
as you say, the my playground, if you like, where I used to service, when the service management centres, I worked for a very large global distribution company, and when our team was on duty, we looked after the whole world. So every airline, every hotel company, every car company, anything going wrong that was loading data into the system, we had to support. So there was a huge visibility of the different ways the countries added their value to these products, but also how they supported them. But in terms of the going across different industries, it's actually the same thing. It's all about understanding who your audience is, understanding what their needs are, and then if you're tailor-making your services to that, they've presumably bought the product that they think is going to help them, so why not give them the service that helps them? So if you understand that and you listen, my mother always said you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, you should use them in that proportion, and she's right. I very rarely do, but that's always an important one, because listening and understanding and then acting, I think, is the key to making that service. So there's a lot of similarities, and to me now in the mainly IT and healthcare industry, it's exactly the same thing. Why do you need that technology to do that? Why is it not doing it? Let's make it happen. So very similar.
What I find amazing about that type of role, particularly a global distribution, you're looking after, in this instance, people moving and migrating around the world and commuting around the world, is so much of what could happen at any given moment on any given day is completely outside of your control.
Yep.
How do you personally handle keeping your cool when something big and unforeseen can happen in terms of an incident of any type, technical or otherwise?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I think the couple of answers to it I would put. If you go to a hospital and you see nurses and doctors, they get up every day to go and help people. Now, they see some horrendous things. They see some very difficult things, and they have to manage some very difficult situations. They're a special type of person where that flicks their buttons. They've got a way of compartmentalizing the difficult things, but adding value in the good things. And I think from a service industry point of view, it's very similar to that. So I would never have someone phone me up and say, oh, by the way, and the system's absolutely fantastic today. You see our transactions went through in milliseconds. That's wonderful. You guys are the best. We get up every morning to handle problems. We have, when they're not usually small problems, they could be anything from airlines not loading their fares correctly across the world. And we used to load, well, probably more now, but we used to load 300 million fares 12 times a day. So that's an awful lot of data that can go wrong at any one time. And then you've got your escalations, and it's about really getting the team, getting yourself in the headspace, going, I can make a difference today. Okay, yes, it's a problem, but let's understand it. Let's learn from it. And if you look at it as if it's something you can avoid doing in the future, then the problem's been worthwhile happening. So I think what I've always told my teams is it's happening for a reason. You bring to the table the solution, and the people around you are there to help you. And then if we've learned from it, written a standard operating procedure to avoid it happening, talk to the product team to make sure it doesn't happen again, make sure we do this type of testing, then you've actually grown and it's been a good thing. So I always believe that that's the headspace you need to bring in. So there's been some interesting incidents, I would say. And now, moving industries, we're dealing with hospitals, so wireless networks and networks in hospitals. So there's obviously security concerns. There's the ability for duress buttons. There's various things that go on now with these connected health and the connected devices that people are using with their tablets and their electronic medical records, etc. This is critical clinical grade networks. So it's very, very important that we have the testing, the setup, the verification, the security along those, so that the day-to-day support is a lot better. So we feed back an awful lot of information back into the teams who are actually building it, as well as back to the suppliers to make sure that the little things that we find when we're implementing is what they change the product. Because again, I've found in my career around the world, you can go to many meetings, you can go to many seminars, where you find most of the information is people on the help desk or people in coffee rooms chatting about what's happening. So my last point on that is when we add service onto a product, we're basically adding the experience of 30 years, 20 years, whatever the people have been doing, to how that problem can be solved. And I think the other element is we in service very rarely deal with the products when they work, right? In hospitals, the nurses very rarely deal with healthy people, right?
Yep.
So it's a different world, it's a different viewpoint. So when you've got that as an ethos, if you like, you can use that to your advantage. So when you're testing products, for example, we find it very useful just to put a bunch of help desk guys in and try and break the product. Right. And they broke it within 5 minutes. We did that when I was working at the GDS. So we did that, and that was great. The product team then went away, changed that, made it all happen, and then it was a much better product when it came out. So involve the value and respect the service people, and they will give you so much more information on your product. And it will help it evolve and get into a good space.
Can I ask, you mentioned earlier about there's a certain type of person that this flicks the switch for in terms of solving these types of problems and dealing with the unpredictable every day. I expect a lot of the time to help solve those problems, you're dealing with people who are very uncomfortable in this type of environment. If I think about it, might be engineers, for instance, that are put all of a sudden under the pump, down tools, focus on this, fight this fire. How do you manage, whilst you're able to keep your emotions and things in check and stay rational, how do you manage others when it's quite often them that are feeling the brunt of the need to resolve the incident?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing when you're in the heat of an incident, if you want to put it that way, no matter what it is how you communicate and how you work as a team. So the way that I've done it, and it's based on experience, but everybody's got their own skill set. So I've come in, I've swapped industries. I've been doing different things now in IT for about 6 years, but I am not going to be the engineer that changes the settings on a router or a switch or a firewall. So what I need to do is get the engineer who has that capability onto that problem as soon as possible after we've understood what the problem is. And then I work out what do we then do and who do we need to get around this problem to manage it as best we can. So whether that's someone from marketing who can work out what messaging we need to give to the customers in the post-incident review, but be truthful with it. Also, how do I need to manage the senior management of the customer? How do we need to make sure they're communicated? And how does the engineer get given the time and the space to actually solve the problem? So what I've done is, when we have a major incident, we put a sort of war room and a major incident team together. And what we do is we make sure that everybody knows exactly what the role is. And I'll take that, you take that, you take that, you just do that. And then everybody knows what they're doing. And one of the biggest things that I find in an incident is it's communication. Now, if you're looking for, if it was you that you were talking to when you were servicing them, if you think about it that way, what would you want to know? You'd want to know it was looked after. You'd want to know that the person had the technical capabilities, the headspace, as well as the backup to do it. So it's making sure that that communication happens. And I think we all know that when we call up a call center or we call up some place that we need to get some service, as soon as you put the phone down, you either put the phone down going, they've got no idea what I'm talking about, or they've got this, I'm going to get something back in 5 minutes and I'm happy.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So if you've got the headspace and you've got the talent and you've got the communication skills, you say it's going to be 5 minutes. If you've got it sorted in 3, call them in 3. That's all good, and that's it. That's delighting in the expectation, I guess. But the other thing is setting that expectation. So in very big incidents, you'll find that there'll be a lot of pressure to solve it immediately. But you've got to keep a level head. You've got to say, well, do we solve it? Do we do a workaround? And what impact is currently happening? So particularly in the GDS, we used to do the weight and balance of aircraft. So that's obviously a very important part of the travel industry, making sure planes are taking off and leaving. Yep. And similarly in the healthcare industry, we've got clinical incidents, things that are happening in hospitals. So it's about keeping that level head, saying, okay, can we get this, for example, back into a high availability state where we've got both links working 100%? Because at the moment they're currently down, or can I just get one of them working so that we've at least got the duress buttons working, we've at least got the capability of the nurses to have the messaging services, etc. And then we'll work on what the high availability is, and we'll do another change later on. And that's just doing that. But you've got to manage the customer through it. You've got to manage the team who you're supporting it through it. But you've also got to talk to the supplier as well. Right. So you've got to communicate to them to get their top people on it to make sure that they're helping you. So it's all round, but that comes with experience. But I think it's the listening first and then acting. So who's it impacting? How big is it? What does that mean to you? And then getting the right people around the problem. So that's probably the key thing.
You mentioned earlier about bringing people together in a war room. Nowadays, with so much of the workforce distributed, is there anything you do different when everyone's at different sites or different locations when it comes to rallying around, firstly understanding the problem and then resolving it?
Yeah, so the again, based on experience, now everyone is connected, so providing the wireless is up. Yeah. So people have got the Cisco products on their phone, they've got various conferencing messaging systems. So in our communication plan, what it's very important to do is, who do you need to be talking to? How do you get hold of everyone, and what your escalation paths are? So what we do is, in my current role, we use Cisco WebEx Teams, and what we do is we have a communication where we put the customer in and us, and rather than constantly phoning for updates and getting stressed because you can't get hold of someone and they can't get hold of them because they're fixing the problem, it's all in that space, so you can be doing stuff while you're reading this, and that involves all of the people within the company that need to be known. It involves the customer, and it can actually involve the supplier as well. So you have this 3-way communication going on, and the idea of that is A, it's comfort, B, you know that it's being fixed, and C, you know what's being done. Because sometimes a lot of the answers come from the customer who hasn't possibly, well, you've maybe not asked them what the issue is, but they actually know the answers. So, and the perfect example would be someone phoning saying their computer's out, but they've actually got a power outage, but we never asked them that question. Right. So you're going off checking these servers and the products and all these other things when they've got a power outage. So when they suddenly say it comes back on again, we've just not asked the right questions. So the right people asking the right questions at the right time and getting that communication plan working. It's a best practice, but I've found that if you do that, and then in your incident review, if you can not be questioned for your attitude and your ability to do it, that is a palatable thing for a customer, because they know it's been a hardware failure, or they know that it's been an issue with the product. It's nobody's fault as such. It's much more hard to swallow when it's been a human's fault. Yep. So I guess the headspace of making sure you're on your A game and you're actually
Yep.
Everybody's doing the same thing, and you can see each other backing each other, and you get energy from that. And I think around big incidents, that's when organisational energy really, really works, because that's what you bring to the problem, and that's what your company does. So that's your brand, if you like.
Energy's an interesting one. How do you manage your own energy and the energy of the team? When I think about a big incident, the first 5 minutes is you've got the phone call or you've seen the alert and the adrenaline kicks in.
Yep.
Like you almost want to go into defence straight away.
Yep.
And everyone really wants to solve the problem, as you say, as rapidly as possible,
Yep.
almost at any other cost.
Yep.
And then over hours or even possibly days,
Yep.
if this still isn't resolved, energy levels and desire and motivation to fix this and
Yep.
stay upbeat about it can be tough. How do you manage that, not only yourself, but the team that are looking to resolve?
Yeah, that's what I do every day. So,
Yeah.
I mean, one could be happening now. I'll just keep checking my phone. But no, the key thing is the right people around you and being able to scale. So I always look at it that, yes, we're having one incident now, but we could be having a bigger one in 5 minutes. So how do you make sure that you've got the team around you? How do you make sure that you've got the right headspace, the right engineers with the right skills? So I think the main thing going into it is just understanding first what it is. Who do I need to have around the table? And then what skills do we need to do and what our communication plan is. But I think the one of the biggest things that we need to bring to that equation is that you want to manage this as well as you can and get out of it as well as you can for the customer. And then if you do that, then the company you represent and the product you represent gets out of it as well too. So I think a lot of companies will automatically be defensive, and they'll say, well, it's not the product and it must be you. It must be your network. It's not the product. And you say, okay, we don't know that. So let's discount that. Let's chunk this up so that we get to the point where you check the network, you check the product, you check the application, and you check this. So it's sort of segmenting the various things that we do. And I think that means that if you one area that's looking at the wireless, for example, they find out that that's all fine, you at least know that's okay. So it must then lead to this logically to go there. So that again is old heads bringing into problems. But again, going back to my earlier point about what service does to a product, they're buying you as well. It's not just the product, they're buying your experience. And if you can bring that to the table and demonstrate that, the customer has a proper understanding and a proper trust that you're going to deal with it. So one of the other elements I've always worked with the suppliers is talking to account managers, and hopefully most of them will not hear this, but I usually say, your job as an account manager for me is that I never call you, because that means everything's fine. So it's all working through the organisation. The managers are getting what they need, the team are getting what they need, the training's being done, the product information's being done, the guys know the product, they can support it. But when I call you, it'll be it's all on. So I think part of the big incident management is that I will get the right people around this from the supplier or from the customer based on that trust. So once they've helped you, you make sure that they're thanked, you make sure that they know the value that they've added to you in the heat of that incident, and then you make sure that the next time you need them, they're there in the right headspace and they don't mind helping Iain at Architect because he's been a good guy and he did the right thing by me. So it's about how you come out of the incident from a customer point of view, but also supplier, but also thanking your team. So the guys put in a hard lot of effort. That's when you need them. It's like a striker in football. You need them when they get the ball delivered. They need to put it in the back of the net.
Like it can.
Yep.
You mentioned, back in the early days of travel and going through travel and GDS systems, which I know can be quite old technologies, through to where you are today, which is leading edge technologies. What have you seen change, and what have you changed over the years when it comes to sort of product management of services? With obviously customers, cloud integration, there's a lot more variables, I imagine, nowadays in some ways. What's changed most for you?
I think the interesting things, probably September the 11th was the biggest change in the travel industry in terms of what we needed to do. There was an awful lot of cost cutting coming on. There was an awful lot of change of direction of companies as well, and not just in the travel industry. You've got conferencing facilities that took off because people weren't traveling. But as a company, from a product point of view, when people weren't booking, that was losing a lot of revenue. So the key thing in terms of understanding your product portfolio is what do you then diversify into to then make sure you're still making money if one area of your channel is hurting. So I think the biggest change has been in the focus of cost. Everyone still wants the same service. Everyone wants better service because the products are getting better, but they don't want to pay for it. So that's one of the most important things that I've found to change in that after that realm. So an example I'd give you, you've got your first level, which is your normal break fix, understanding the problem, triaging the problem, and then you've got your senior engineers who are the more expensive ones because they've got more qualifications, more experience, etc. Then you get your third level, then you get management. The key thing is in triaging those at the lowest cost, and that was something that most industries went through, particularly travel, and making sure that you're adding value there. Now there was a lot of companies put their call centres in other countries simply because of cost. Now the example that we did, I've done it twice now, our service rocketed. We were fantastic at service. There was an awful lot of benefits that came out of that. We started a brand new team. We recruited them all ourselves. They were reporting to us. They were just in a different country. And I think the biggest change that I tried to effect with the customers, because change management's a huge thing. When you're putting out a new product and you're adding a service on top of it, you're going to make sure the customers are knowing what that is. We were able to do 24/7. We were able to handle tickets quicker. We were able to do them with better capabilities because there were more qualified staff. So it's been a very successful model. And the other thing that happened with September the 11th is a lot of companies immediately did travel bans. Can't start, we can't travel, we can't do this. The change in products from a conferencing point of view accelerated very quickly. It meant that people still did commerce, but they did it via conference calls, and they did it on their phone, and they did it in these WebEx, big, fancy screens, etc. But executives didn't stop traveling because executives still need to travel to meet, to do certain things. So we found that it was the mixture of people traveling that changed. It wasn't actually necessarily the budget.
Right.
So people actually communicated more. They did more because they couldn't travel, so they communicated more. And I think that was actually probably quite a good thing that came out of all that. So yeah, it's changed quite a bit. But I think the globalization of a lot of the world has become smaller because of these aircraft that can fly, Perth to London in one hit now. That's sped up a lot of commerce, but also it's supply and demand. So some routes are all expensive and other ones are not. But all of it to me is about how you're supporting that, how you're working with your partners, and how you're getting your customers happy.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for talking through this completely different topic to recent episodes. So it's been good fun. You enjoyed yourself? I
did indeed. I hope there'll be subtitles at the bottom of the podcast. Thanks, Jay.
All good. Cheers, Iain. This has been great. Thanks for listening to this episode of Product Coalition podcast. Thanks again to Proud Mary as our location sponsor. Hope you've all enjoyed this episode. Make sure you jump on to Apple, Google Podcasts or Spotify if you want to subscribe. We're also on SoundCloud as well. Look forward to sharing a new episode with you next week. Thank you, everyone.